Okay, it's June 13th, 2025, and this video is showing my current approach to surface mount soldering using solder paste and a hot plate and flux. So this is a little board, pretty simple. It's got one surface mount component here. Actually, this is the integrated circuit, so it's got the pins on either side. Then it's got two capacitors, and then it's got a voltage regulator here. So the hardest part is soldering on this one. The capacitors are relatively easy, especially since I made them pretty big, and the voltage regulator is also pretty easy. So the trick is you want to put enough solder paste so that when you heat it up, the components slide into place naturally, but not too much that if you put too much on, then they won't slide, and if you put too little on, then they won't slide. So you got to have the right balance. So this is the solder paste I'm going to use, Chip Quick. It has a low melting point, and I found that for hand soldering you want to try to use as little heat as possible, because although these boards are pretty resilient, they can be destroyed if you put too much heat on it. So notice I've got a green nozzle on here. So it doesn't have to be exact. In fact, one trick that I sometimes do is kind of tap it into place, looks like smudge it. All this stuff is. Okay, when you place your components, you don't need to have it exactly in the right spot. It just needs to be close. So I put this one on. Just try to visually slide it into place. That looks pretty good. Okay, I've roughly placed my components where they're supposed to go. So here's my setup. I've got this burner used for cooking. It's got its own heat element, I guess, but I didn't like the heat distribution, so I got this extra piece of metal disc to go on top to distribute the heat better. So what I'm going to do is just turn this on full blast, and then when I see the solder start to melt, I'm going to turn it off completely, and I'll start filming when that happens again. Okay, it's starting to melt. So now I'm going to turn the hot plate off completely because I don't want to damage the board. And now it's going to stay, the solder is going to stay in a molten state for a while. So usually what I do now is, you can see there's some solder bridges over here. The main thing I want to check is to make sure these ICs, well, this only has one, but make sure the integrated circuits are in the right place. I usually tap them a little bit to make sure they're making good contact. So I'm visually inspecting this. If I slide this a little bit, it should self-correct. So that looks like it's right on target to me. And the main goal that I have here is to make sure this is aligned properly. Now if I check these capacitors, you can see it. You can see as I slide the capacitor, it slides back into place. Same with that one. Voltage regulator. Just tap it a little bit. So everything looks good to me now. So now I'm going to remove this from heat carefully and let it cool down, and then I'll remove the solder bridges. Okay, so now the board is cool. So there's some solder bridges here, here, here. And there's probably some pins that don't have good connection on here also. So the way I get rid of that is using flux. So this is the flux that I like to use. So it does get pretty messy, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to put 2 globs on either side of that. I'm going to put one here because this stuff's going to pool outward and gets pretty messy, but it cleans off. So I also have, let's see, I also have solder wick to remove the bridges. So I'm going to use a combination of the flux, the soldering iron, and the solder wick. Just waiting for my iron to heat up here. Alright, so I take the iron, just as you see, as I melt the flux, it pools all over the place. So I basically want a nice distribution of flux all over. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is tackle this solder bridge. So I'm going to take the iron and just slowly drag it down, and you'll hopefully see that the solder moves from the top down to the bottom, like that. So now all the solder's at the bottom. Now I'm going to take the wick, put it right here, put the iron on top of the wick, and there, all the extra solder is sucked off, and I can still drag the iron. Now that looks really professional, even though I'm just doing this by hand. So I'm going to do the same thing the other side. I'm going to drag the solder, the extra solder, up and down, because I want to make sure each pin gets good contact. And I also need the solder to congregate in one spot. So I'm going to take the wick, same thing as before, put the iron on the wick. That's looking very nice now. Alright, so that chip is done. I'm just going to, sometimes with the solder paste, you get little balls of solder all over the board, and so I'm just going to go around and kind of touch the rest of the board, make sure these capacitors have good contact. Oops. Oh, I got lucky there. I accidentally had both parts of this capacitor heated up at the same time, and it moved, but then it slid back into place, so I got lucky. Of course, capacitors are not a big deal. I'm just going to touch these pins on this voltage regulator, and then this big one down here. I don't have much paste here at the bottom. Alright, so that's looking really good to me now. The last thing that I want to do is, and this is something I have just kind of learned from past failures, is I'm going to take the iron and just push down on each of these pins on this surface mount component, just to make sure it's making good contact. Because I've had so many times where I thought I was done, and then something wasn't working, and this one of these pins wasn't making good contact. So I'm just going to give it a little push, not too hard, but Just pushing down on these just to make sure they're really making good contact. This will save me potentially extra troubleshooting in the future. Alright, so that's looking really good now. Now I'm going to clean off this flux and I should be done. Alright, to clean the flux off, the first thing you want to do is make sure the flux is wet. If you just let it sit here for a long time, it'll, like a day, it'll dry. But you can get it wet again just by heating it up with the iron. Okay, so once it's wet, I just take a wipe. Like in this case, it's just like this could be like a Lysol wipe or whatever. Try to get most of it up with the wipe. So, and then whatever is left over, there's a few things you can do. You can squirt rubbing alcohol and then use a toothbrush. The problem with that is that usually it'll leave some residue somewhere, so that's not the best idea. I've also used Goo Gone, spray it on here for 2 minutes, scrub it, and then rinse it off under the sink, and then dry it. That seems to work pretty well. The Goo Gone does leave a small amount of residue, but you can, usually it's almost nothing, so you can't even tell. I also have this flux remover that's specifically for flux, dissolves the flux. So those are different things you can do. Probably the one I use the most is the Goo Gone. I've had people tell me not to use the Goo Gone, but because it's probably not the best, but it works for me, so I'm just going to squirt this on here. And set a 2-minute timer, scrub it, rinse it off in the sink, and then I'm done. Alright, so I washed it, dried it, it's all clean. I do notice I have a little bit of solder right here that I missed before, so I just take the iron and it's gone. So that looks really good to me. This part, that looks really precise. So that's the beauty of using solder paste and heat, is the parts tend to slide into place by themselves, so you can get something that looks professional even though you did it yourself with your iron and a hot plate. So I hope this is helpful. See you in the next video.